Yeah, no, it's much too late to get an attitude about it now, guys. We are in the gut of it, okay? So, make the best of your situation.
Wait,
Please start a smile.
What's our attitude about? What's our attitude about?
I don't know. I do not know. It's not for me to guess. Okay, here we go. So when we talk about indigenous responses, we are talking about how in large part, the native people in areas where colonization, imperialization is taking place, how they are going to push back on it, okay? And so we're going to see what we can do here with time that we have to see how many parts of the world we can move through, all right? And I'm going to start you off in southeastern Europe, and then we're just going to start flying all over the place. So the Balkans, and remember, Balkans, under the control of whom? Ottoman Empire, thank you. Right, and we've already covered where the Balkans were already starting to fragment. Independence movements down in that part. Greece had already fought and won its independence. Serbia had broken away from the Ottoman Empire, okay? And so as we're going further into the 19th century, we're going to see more of, basically encouraged. You know, you see a couple of countries gain their independence from the Ottomans. Others are going to want to jump on board after that, all right? And so I'm going to take you to number 1 and number 2 there. And you're going to have a few more countries that are going to also rise up, basically freedom movements, resistance movements against the Ottomans. You're going to see Bulgaria and Romania and Montenegro. All 3 of those will break free of the Ottoman Empire, okay? Going in, they are part of the empire. Coming out the other side, they have all won their independence, okay? And we're talking about all countries that are getting down, like I said, down deep south and eastern part of Europe, breaking away from the Ottoman Empire, all right? Go ahead. So, yeah, Bulgaria, Romania, and Montenegro. Okay. Those 3. And for some Unit 7 foreshadowing, this is the fragmentation that goes down there is going to end up creating all kinds of kind of ethnic differences and all kinds of friction. And it is going to be this part of Europe where World War I is going to end up breaking out, okay? And so sometimes we're going to see where, you know, these independence movements, in the wake of them, are going to be all kinds of issues that are left, you know, remaining. And those of you that did some work with me last year in World Studies, if you got a good memory, remember some of that. Okay? So we'll take off from Europe and head back over to the Americas. Right, the focus in North America especially is after the Revolutionary War. What, Jacob?
So would you say nationalism was a real driver, not the first one?
Nationalism is going to be a big one. Yep. We'll definitely touch on that when we get into Unit 7. Nationalism is going to kind of soak through all of these because really everywhere we're looking, including the United States. You know, again, people, you know, that identity that people that have is going to drive a lot of movement. With here in America, again, like I was saying, post-Revolutionary War, you're going to see a lot of these American settlers that are pushing further and further westward. Okay, and we'll get started with 1830 when the U.S. government passes the Indian Removal Act, and this is what, you know, I mean. You'll get fairly deep in this if you take A+, even if you take American history next year as a junior. You're still going to probably get a dose of it. And you know, after the Revolutionary War, we are a rapidly growing nation, and a nation that, I mean, is definitely embracing strong nationalist feelings and rapidly expanding. East of the Mississippi, they immediately are going to start bumping into Native American tribes that are trying to hang on to traditional lands that they've had for generations. Very quickly, American settlers are going to overwhelm those tribes. Okay, one of the biggest tribes down in southeastern United States was called the Cherokees. And when gold is discovered in their land, kind of present-day Georgia, they are basically lifted up and moved to present-day Oklahoma. An example of the kind of what we call displacement that's going on. Okay, and pretty much it is clearing land for American settlers. And through an AP World lens, we view this as an example basically of internal imperialism, okay? Because the United States government is using its power, drop some of these in here, using its power to, again, to move indigenous people out of territory that they want to take over. And we're going to see that same pattern. Actually, the notes you've already covered are getting into that same pattern. So it starts in the eastern United States, and then by the time we get to post U.S. Civil War, we'll start moving into the western part of the United States. And at that point, with more immigration going on in the United States, post-war big push west, you're going to have more native tribes under pressure to surrender land, give up land to settlers. The Native American tribes out there will fight to hang on to their land. And there will be a series, kind of lump them all together, we call them the Indian Wars, that happened in the United States, mostly out here in the West. Tribes like the Sioux, Cheyenne, the Apache, the Nez Perce, and these are all, one by one, these are tribes that are fighting to try to maintain their way of life, their culture, sometimes their very existence. But they're fighting against a government that has most of the tools that they need to have the advantage, especially in terms of military might and military technology. And one by one, those tribes are either brought under control, in some cases pretty well decimated. So that by the time you get to the 1890s, most Native Americans left in the western United States are confined to little reservations, and the rest of the land is open to settlement. Okay, that's the resistance, but defeat. All right, down there at the bottom, give you the quick and dirty here on France and Mexico. Yes, well, we can get Mexico into it. Mexico, through the 19th century, goes through a series of revolutions. They finally shake the Spanish off so that Mexico is independent. And that is reality by about 1825, that Mexico is now an independent country, no longer under Spanish control, okay? But through the series of revolutions that they have, Mexico struggles mightily to try to establish any kind of stability, politically speaking. And in the middle of all of that, one group of Mexicans will literally invite the French to come in, help them to gain control over the country, and to establish a French emperor to control Mexico, okay? Sounds crazy because it is, and it doesn't work out very well, okay? The French emperor of Mexico ends up being executed. And not a very successful attempt by France in that case to kind of colonize Mexico. All right, so sometimes it works out well, and sometimes it's kind of a crash and burn. And France gets a quick lesson there that the days of colonization, maybe in the Western Hemisphere, the sun is kind of set. Okay, so that's a little bit there to go with France and Mexico. All right, head to another part of the world. And talk about the British and India, which I know covered in video notes, but a little bit more detail here as the British are taking more and more complete control over India. We talked about how first it's the British East India Company that establishes economic control over India. Now we get to that period where now the British government is coming in behind there and going to turn India into an all-out colony. Okay. The Sepoy Revolt. Sepoys was the name given to Indian soldiers that the British government recruited okay? A lot of times when these European countries would establish a colony, they did not have the manpower to send in these large military forces to go into a country and just stay there, okay? I mean, you think about Great Britain, it's a small island country, and they're limited in the size of their military. So the pattern that they follow, and many other European countries follow the same, is that they use their military to go in and take over and establish a colony. But once they've accomplished that, usually they are going to recruit indigenous people, okay? Native troops that will be commanded by European officers. And they're gonna be the ones who are then going to have control. They're the ones help to run the colony. Okay, got that. Right. The sepoys was the name given to those Indian soldiers that were fighting. In effect, they are recruited and they're working for the British. Okay, this is a revolt that gets started for probably the strangest of reasons. What you have happen in 1857 is the weapons that the British supply the sepoys with. They are converting to a new kind of cartridge that they use, and these are old black powder weapons. Okay, this is still back in the good old days before you're getting into weapons with kind of hard metal casings and that sort of thing. The cartridges that they used in the military back then usually was something that looked like this. They're paper in effect. Okay. And tied off on the end, and if you tore one open, what you'd find is a bullet, and then the rest of it is gunpowder. Okay, and these are those good old muzzle loaders where you then tear open. Usually, soldiers are trained to tear that cartridge open with their teeth, drop the bullet down the barrel, pour the powder, and then you ram it all down, put a firing pin, and boom, there you go, fire your weapon. Okay. The British start issuing a new form of cartridge to their sepoys, and to guard against kind of weatherproofing the cartridge, they soak the paper that they use in grease. Okay, the grease comes from a combination of both cow and pig fat. Jacob understands where we're going here. Okay, most of the sepoys are Hindu. All right, yeah. There's a problem. Those of you that are still not sure what's going on here, the Hindus they consider cows sacred. It is a big sin to consume anything, any part of a cow, and so ordering a Hindu Indian to put their mouth on a cartridge that is soaked in cow fat, that's a sin to them. Okay. And even Hindus, even Muslims, there are some Muslim sepoys as well. Well, the pig fat that is also used throws them into the mix as well. Both of those faiths have they have very tight rules on this. The sepoys, they see this, and other Indians as well, as a sign that the British are going to somehow kind of be slowly trying to convert them to Christianity. And so it's with the introduction of this new cartridge that they revolt, okay, in 1857. They revolt against the British government. It is a revolt that ultimately will be unsuccessful. The British will kind of clamp down control. And by the time you see an end to the revolt, what you have instead is a shift into what comes to be known as the British Raj. And that word, R-A-J, Raj, simply is a reference to the British colonial government in India. Okay? British colonial government, they refer to it as the Raj. And so whenever you see that fall in anywhere, in any kind of reading you're doing, that's all they're talking about. British administration of India during colonial times here. Okay? Here we go. All right. So, unsuccessful example with the Sepoy Revolt. What will eventually, long road, but eventually will be a successful example of revolt is going to be the establishment of the INC, okay, Indian National Congress, in the year you got up there. All right, I'll take that from you. So Tyler, Haley, just sit tight. I'm videoing off the notes for you, and so, I'll get back to you one way or another. I'll probably just email them to you or something like that, okay? And the INC is kind of like it sounds, Congress, this isn't some kind of like revolutionary militant group. This is a lot of Indians who actually are educated by the British, okay? The British had the habit of kind of handpicking specific young Indian, usually men, and taking them back to England and having them educated in British universities, and then sending them back to India, okay? Why would they want to do that? Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to be sending you some notes too. We're out of here, okay? Why would the British want to educate the very people that they are colonizing? Mason? It's a good guess. They're going elsewhere with it though, okay? You go. Puppets for them, so that they can bring them back, and it's kind of like you've now kind of absorbed more of our culture. Something like that. Okay, I'm not, you kind of going, I can see where you're going with it, yep.
Anti-brain drain kind of thing.
Anti-brain drain, I like that, okay. So you're trying to kind of just beef up the intellect, at least, through British eyes. Okay, I can see that, yeah.
Is it so they can go back to India and like make it more successful so that they can like profit
How would they make it more successful?
with their new ideas?
Their new
that they
ideas,
learned in
their
British?
shiny new British ideas, okay, Liam?
So they can work in British Raj.
They can work in the British Raj, okay, and one more,
To make it more like Britain.
to make it more like Britain. None of you are wrong, none of you are wrong. Probably the rightest is Liam, okay? Because a lot of times what they're doing is they're thinking, once you have that education, we are going to insert you in a position in the colonial government, okay? It gives, for the British, it gives them a little bit of, a look of authenticity, so that, the Indian people can't look at their government and say, it's a whole bunch of foreigners that are, telling us what to do. Instead, they're gonna see a mix. Yes, they're gonna see some British administrators, but they're also gonna see some Indian faces in the British government, okay? They're not gonna be given positions of real power and authority, but a lot of them are gonna be kind of in the bureaucracy of the Indian colonial government, of the Raj, okay? That's really kind of what they're powering for. But the other elements you talk about, yeah, those pieces come into play as well, right? In 1915, this guy will join the Indian National Congress. Someone's got to know who he is. Gandhi, okay? Mahatma Gandhi. He is, that's the early days. He still has his hair and all that kind of thing. He is British educated. He's educated in a British university. And he is one who, goes back to help administer. He's a lawyer when he gets back and spends some time down in South Africa, helping the British to run that colony, okay? Because sometimes the British they're flipping people from one colony to another. But in 1915, he's back in India. He will join the INC, and he is going to be that powerhouse that by 1946 will win independence for India from the British, okay? Like I said, long road, but ultimately the INC is going to be successful in gaining their independence. All right, Southeast Asia. You're going to understand, hopefully you're going to wrap your brains around the theme here, and that is anywhere we look at the world where colonization is happening, there's resistance, okay? Nowhere in the world do people just roll over and say, oh, guess they got us, all right? And we could just say that is just good old human nature in action. It is the natural reaction that when outsiders come in and are trying to force themselves on a people, usually that people is going to try to push back in some way, shape, or form. Okay, shouldn't surprise us. All right, Vietnam.
Those heads.
What's that?
Those heads.
Those are heads. Yes. Yeah, you got a close view of it too. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, what Anderson is referring to is not just heads, but heads that no longer have bodies, okay? They're just heads, And, well, I mean, we talk about the Congo and King Leopold down there, the tactics and the strategies and just the methods used by some of these colonizers can be, I mean, beyond the pale brutal, okay? And, I mean, it kind of varies as you look from different kinds of colonies and the different groups of control. But the French, yeah, they are ones who almost from the beginning, I mean, from the first time they began the process of colonizing in modern day Vietnam, they are meeting resistance. And as the photograph would kind of give you an idea, they meet that resistance with a lot of brutality, okay? The Vietnamese people themselves, they rebel, they fight back, but another one that ultimately is unsuccessful. And that will remain a colony of the French until after World War II, when they give up and take off and hand off to the United States. But that's a story for another day, okay? That should be a number 2, yeah, that should be a number 2, the observant ones. All right, the Philippines. We'll start off with Jose Rizal. So, still under the control of the Spanish, okay, as we're rolling into the 19th century. And, I mean, by that time, it's been under the control of the Spanish for centuries. And by that point in time, yeah, the Filipino people are starting to get some yearnings for independence and freedom themselves. Rizal forms what is called the Philippine League. And this is made up of Filipinos who want to start a pathway to independence. They're not a militant group. It's not like they're shaking the trees and saying, let's go to war. They're thinking nothing like that. Matter of fact, Rizal himself was pretty loyal to the Spanish rulers of the Philippines. But at the same time, he's creating this league that wants to at least start the discussion about potential eventual independence. For doing that, the Spanish arrest him and execute him. Okay, literally just a little bit certain, and executed. That is going to trigger a full-on revolution, okay, by the Filipino people. I guess that shouldn't be too surprising, and that revolution won't in and of itself be successful, okay, but that revolution will be going on when Spain kind of blunders its way into a war in 1898 against the United States, okay? Another one you'll take on, whether you do APUSH or American history next year, will be the Spanish-American War, okay? And this is kind of, Spanish-American War is a lot of times viewed as the United States. This is kind of the first time we're showing the world that, we are interested in maybe not creating an empire like European countries, but we are kind of falling a little bit into that mold. We too want to expand. We too want a little bit more of a global presence. And this is the first time in the United States that we'll really take a big move forward like this. Our war with Spain is very, very quick, and we defeat Spain. Here in the Caribbean, fighting in Cuba. This is where we acquired Puerto Rico, a few other possessions from the Spanish in the Caribbean, and we also get the Philippines from Spain, okay? When we win that war and oust the Spanish, the Filipinos themselves were celebrating because they believed that the United States had come in, defeated the Spanish, and they assumed the United States would then say, Philippines, have your freedom, have your independence, thank you, you're welcome, we're gonna head back home. Instead, the United States stays, okay? So to the Filipinos, they've just traded basically in their eyes, one oppressor for another. And so they now start a revolution, basically a guerrilla war against the United States, is what you got there for C. Go ahead, Liam. well, yeah, and that's why we're not gonna leave, you know, because I mean, when that war concludes, when we get the Spanish out of there, and yes, we do give Spain some money for it, okay? I mean, so that way you can say, oh, no, it was, yeah, we paid for it, okay? But I mean, that's what governments do sometimes. What our bigger fear is that strategically speaking, where the Philippines sit, you know, they're in East Asia out there, was that if we just walked away, someone else was gonna come in and grab it, okay? Which is a big part of the reason why we choose to stay. We want a presence in the Pacific. And so this is the way it's gonna happen. But it's gonna require us to fight a couple of years of a really, really ugly war against the Filipino people, which we do finally crush the rebellion. And then the Philippines will be ours. I mean, we leave after World War II. We give them their independence in 1946. But from that point on, it is more or less, we don't call it a colony, it's kind of like a colony, okay? Continue.
Didn't the Spanish-American War start because, you know, we figured out who blew up the
Yes,
USS Maine?
yes, the USS Maine, which blows up in Havana Harbor in 1898. United States blames Spain for it. We really, matter of fact, most of the evidence we have nowadays was a completely accidental explosion. It was probably just coal dust in the hold of the ship. But we blame Spain, boom, we got a war. And when the dust settles, we have Cuba, we have Puerto Rico, we've got a few other islands, we have the Philippines. Okay, so there you go. That's how it works sometimes. All right, let's go down to the land down under. Haley, do me a quick view. Look at that. Does Megan need
27
to move her
minutes.
head?
Yeah, Megan might need to move.
Okay, Megan, go sit back there with Haley. Okay. This is the way you're gonna get your notes. So you don't wanna block the screen, right? This is how you're gonna get your notes. All right. All right, when the British first show up in Australia, remind me again, why did the British open up Australia as a colony? They needed prison, yeah. They needed so much prison, it's like, we might as well take over a whole country and make it a prison. And that's pretty much what Australia gets its beginnings as, okay, as a what they call a penal colony, all right? What's that? Working off debts, yeah, a lot of them are. A lot of them are convicts from England who simply, you know, I mean, some of them were hardened criminals. Some were pretty rough characters. A lot of Irish end up there, and a lot of poor English people who just couldn't pay the bills, right? And it does. Gives them, number one, gives them a place to put them. Those of you remember your American history, remember Georgia colony was kind of the same idea. Georgia was first established. But also it gives England that foothold in that part of the world in terms of, you know, expanding their empire. That along with New Zealand, which we've already talked a little bit about, because New Zealand is where the Maori people were, Haka, all that kind of thing, all right? The Aboriginal people who were in Australia, they still to this day, they have the distinction of being the longest continuous culture. I mean, there's no other cultural group we have around the world that have an unbroken chain throughout their history of never really either adopting other elements of culture, assimilating. The Aboriginal people are kind of one all to themselves, even now, in the way that they have been able to maintain their culture, okay? The British show up and they look at these indigenous people and they say, number one, you aren't citizens, okay? So you're not protected by the laws of Britain. And number two, as citizens, you can't own any land. And so land that had been Aboriginal land for, you know, eons, now the British are taking it and establishing it for their colonists, right? The Aboriginals will fight back. The Aborigines fight back against the British, but, you know, it's that old-fashioned, it's a story of a more primitive indigenous culture fighting against a very, very modern military, you know, given the 19th century. And the outcome is pretty much what you would expect. The British are able to clamp down their control on Australia. And then we've already talked about this one, but just reminding you, with the Maori people. Hadn't been in New Zealand as long as the Aboriginals by any stretch. And initially, actually they do business with the British. The British offer them, we'll pay you for your land. And the Maori people start doing that. It's like they're taking some payment. Then they realize, wait a minute, we keep doing this, pretty soon we'll have no land left. They resist the British send in the military, done. And New Zealand belongs to the British at that point as well, all right? And I think we'll end it on some African resistance. We'll start in West Africa, the Sokoto Caliphate. What religion are they? Muslim. And you know that because? Caliphate. Thank you. All right. This goes to war because the Sokoto people are basically early 19th century. They're trying to maintain the slave trade. Okay, they are going to war with other tribes, other kingdoms in neighboring areas. Prisoners of war, just kind of what we learned about in our last unit, and then using those prisoners of war into the slave trade. Okay, their timing is a little bit off. It's early 19th century. The British have outlawed slavery. All right, and so a part of the outbreak of war between these two is for the British to try to shut down their use of the slave trade. All right, and then it just kind of spreads into a greater war beyond there, and that's as far as we